Okay, so probably you have your Amazon credits from me, probably burning a hole in your pocket, or if you've found this video on the web, you're interested in seeing how to set up a server on Amazon using MySQL and SQLite. So let's take a look at that. Here I've done a quick Google search for Amazon console, and we can just click on that link to go to the login. So you do the sign into your Amazon, to your AWS console, enter in your username, and enter in your password. So it brings up your general Amazon console, and we're not really going to do too much with this right now. In fact, generally, my favorite way for accessing accessing stuff, especially if I'm going to use Linux, is I like to use Ubuntu, and a company by the name of Elastic has things set up for us already. So if we go to Elastic. You can see here they have the Ubuntu AMIs. AMI stands for Amazon Machine Image. Essentially, what it is a disk image for you to run a server in the cloud. So if I just go to region, I want East because we're on the East Coast. And you'll notice it gives me a bunch of different options here. So the particular option that we want, I want the latest version of Ubuntu. In this case, it's Saucy. And the one that I want is EBS. This is important. Make sure, for the most part, generally you want EBS instances, unless you really know what you're doing. But generally, EBS is the way to go. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and click on that, and what that's going to do is it's going to drop me back. It's going to open a new console window here that gives me all of the options for starting stuff up. Okay, so it tells me all these things. Here we're going to use a micro instance and all kinds of other stuff. I'm going to go through the configuration details. Okay. So when I click on this, notice it says number of instances. So if I wanted to spin up several servers all at the same time, I could change this. I don't want to do that because the more servers we're running, the more money that costs us. And we really only need one for what we're doing. So I'm going to leave that at 1. I'm going to leave all of these options pretty much at their default. The only real thing that I'm going to change is I'm going to spin open this advanced details, and I'm going to scroll down. Here's the user data section. Okay, user data basically is used if you want your machine as it's starting up to do certain configurations. So it allows systems administrators to set up, to say, install the following software, those kinds of things. So I already have a user data script for us, and that's right here. So in Palm Beach State EDU, faculty Ventura P, DB user-data.text is this content. Okay, so all I'm going to do is just select all this with my mouse, copy, and I'm going to go back over to here and paste that in. Okay, so we see we're installing SQLite, we're installing the SQL Server, MySQL server and client packages. All right, then we'll click on Next for adding storage. Here we don't have to do anything, the defaults are just fine. We'll go to the tag instance again, don't need to do anything, that's just fine. The security group. So what the security group is basically it's a firewall for your server. Okay, you can actually create various server security groups, and I have a number already created. So if I go here, you'll see actually here are a number of my different security groups. But for the sake of this, I'm going to actually walk you through creating one that we can use for this. So my security group, I'm going to call it DB Cloud. You can really call it whatever you want, but we're doing it for the database in the cloud, and we're basically good to go. Now, right now, what this basically says is we have a rule so we can use the SSH protocol to connect to our server. And that's generally what you want. However, notice that in the source, it actually says anywhere. And that basically means anyone from any place on the internet can actually try to SSH into our server. For security purposes, it's not a bad idea to lock that down if you can. If you don't really need to provide access to everyone, then don't. Okay, so I already have set up. I already know what, for instance, the IP range is for our college. Namely, it is, oops, so we'll say custom IP, and then I'm just going to paste this, whoops, sorry. Okay, so it is the following. It is 216.114.80.0/20. Okay, so this is what's called a CIDR specification for a subnet, and this is the range of IP addresses that come out of Palm Beach State. If you're using this from someplace else, you'll obviously want to change this accordingly. So we have that. The other thing we'll do is eventually I'll walk you through in another video adding your own IP address, but that's actually pretty easy. Essentially, you're just going to do add rule. You're going to come to SSH, and from here you can select my IP, and that will actually add your own IP address, the IP address of the computer that you're at. You only want to do that from home. Okay, so I'll show you how to do that in another video to update that. But from our lab computers, basically this is all you're going to need, and then you can go into review and launch. All right, so it basically tells us all kinds of stuff about our the server that we're going to configure, how many that we're setting up, etc. We're basically good to go. Now I'm just going to click launch. Okay, so the next part, and this is incredibly important to pay attention to. I cannot stress this enough. All right, so now when I click launch, notice it says choose an existing key pair, or it actually may, in fact, for yours default to create a new key pair. Okay, and this is what I'm actually going to do. So I'm going to create a new key pair. Right now, as I was saying, this is very important because this is the one and only one time that you will be able to download this key. If you aren't able to download this key at this point, your server starts up and you cannot get in. There's no password. It uses an SSH private key. One of the things I can tell you is you don't want to use Internet Explorer. If you're using Internet Explorer for this, go download a real browser, download Firefox or Chrome, and then start this video off from the beginning and go through all this process again, because Internet Explorer will generally mess up this process of downloading your key pair. Okay, so I'll just give it a name. I'll call it the AWS DB key. Okay, and then I'll say go ahead and download my key pair. Okay, so when I do that, you'll notice it pops up in Firefox. I get a little link. Do I want to open it? Do I want to save it? I do want to save this. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and save, and that downloads it. At the same time, I'm going to say go ahead and launch instances. Okay, so I click on launch instances. You'll notice it comes to this screen. It says, yeah, it's been initiated. If I click on this link here, your number will be different, but basically it's the identifier for your particular instance. When you click on that, it'll open up this window, and it'll show you that that it's doing the work for spinning up your server. Now, while that does that, we have our own work to do. Okay, we actually need to go deal with that server key. Okay, so if I come over here, this is my downloads folder, and here's the file that I actually downloaded, that secret key file that I was talking about. Now, the thing is, to be able to connect in, as I said, we're going to use SSH, and Windows by itself does not have an SSH client, so we need one. The one that we're going to use is Putty. Okay, if you do a Google search for Putty, comes up with this first link right here. Putty is free SSH client and various other SSH software. All right. Now, as you scroll down to the binaries, a couple of words. If you're doing this from home, you're going to want the installer. That is the Windows installer, assuming you're on Windows. You'll want to go ahead and install all of that. Okay. So certainly you'll download that, you'll install it. From the labs, however, for our purposes, since we don't have admin rights on those, we're going to need to just download a few tools, the tools that we're going to use. Okay, so I'm assuming that you're going to be working on this in the lab, at least at first, so I'm just going to download those tools. Okay, the main tools that we're going to need putty.exe. I'll go ahead and save that. We're going to need Pagent. I'll save that. And the first time you deal with the key, you also need PuttyGen. Okay, so I'll save that. All right, so I've saved all those files. Again, those have gone to downloads. All right, so I come over to here. Here's my downloads. All right, So as I said, Putty is the main tool. It is an SSH client. You'll notice the description also says it works for some other protocols. Pagent basically is an SSH agent program. What it basically does is you can load up various keys so that then from that point on you can use Putty and you will automatically use those keys. Now, here's essentially the rub. The problem is that Putty doesn't read this type of key, these PEM files. So what we need to do is to convert that into a format that Putty uses. All right, and that's what PuttyGen is for. So I'm going to double click on PuttyGen. If you installed it from the installer, then you'll be able to go to Start and All Programs, go to Putty, and you'll actually be able to, you'll see PuttyGen and all of those things there. I'm not sure if, yes, I do in fact have it on this. So as I said, if you've installed it, you're working at home, go ahead and run Pagent. On the other hand, or I'm sorry, not Pagent, rather, go ahead and run PuttyGen from your start tools. Again, from the lab, you're going to run PuttyGen right from the program that you downloaded. Okay. Now the good news is you only have to deal with PuttyGen once. That is when you first create a key and you need to convert it into Putty format. Once you've converted it, you don't have to worry about any of this stuff again. All right. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to load up a key, and I'm going to navigate to my downloads directory. Okay. You'll notice that nothing shows, and that's because initially it has this file filter, so you're just going to drop that down to all files, and now you'll see everything. Select your PEM and click Open. Okay. Yeah, that's fine. So there is our key. Now, the first thing it asks you is for key passphrase. Generally, it's a good idea to password protect your SSH key. The thing is this, what happens then is the first time you load that up into Pagent, you're going to be asked for that password. Once it's loaded up into Pagent, you will no longer need that password. So this provides additional security. If you happen to forget and leave yourself logged in on the system, leave your key, somebody gets a copy, they can't use it unless they have the password. So I generally recommend you create a password. But again, make sure you remember it. Okay, so I'll go ahead and create a password here. And the option that you want is to save private key. Okay, so I'm going to click Save Private Key. It's going to ask me for a name. I'm going to use basically the same name that I had before, except I wanted to get rid of this PEM extension, so I'm just going to delete that part. All right, so it's going to save it as a PPK. Okay, so I click Save. I can close this, and right here is my actual key. Okay, that's the file that you need to keep with you. Put it on your flash drive, email it to yourself, whatever you have to do. Don't lose that key. If you lose that key, you will not be able to log into your server. Okay, that doesn't mean you're completely hosed. Essentially, what it means is you'll have to kill the server and recreate the server, restart the server, and generate a new key. But nevertheless, it's kind of a hassle if you have stuff that you really care about on your server. This other file, the PEM file, we don't need anymore. Okay, so I'm going to actually delete it. And I really want to delete it, so I'm going to hold down Shift and hit Delete. So that way it permanently deletes it. Doesn't even go into, doesn't even sit in the recycle bin. Okay. All right. So now that we have those things, we're just about ready to log into our server. Okay. If you've installed Putty from the installer, that is, you're working at home, then you'll have the file extension just set up, or the file association set up like I have here. So if I double click on this, it will automatically run Pagent. Again, if you're not working in an environment where you have admin rights like our labs, what you're going to have to do is simply you run Pagent. Go ahead and run that. Then I can right click on this and say Add Key, and select my PPK file. Now when I click Open, it asks for the password that I created for the key, and I'm good to go. Okay, so now I have all of that here. I can go to View Keys. I can see that my key, in fact, has been loaded. All right, let's fire up Putty. Again, if you have it installed, do it from Start Programs. Otherwise, I'm going to do it from here. Okay. I had something created there. I'm going to walk you through actually creating that. All right. So a couple of things. The first thing I tend to like to do with Putty, I don't like the sort of default font and all of that sort of stuff. So I generally come to appearance here, and I'm going to change that. Consolus, I find, is actually a pretty nice font to use. I'm going to make it a little big so that everybody can see, and I'm going to click OK. Oops. All right, so I have my font changed accordingly. Then I'm going to come back over to Session. All right. The other thing that we're going to set up, we're also going to set up, because we're going to use what's called SSH tunneling. Basically, this means that our connection to our database is going to be secure. Everything's going to be encrypted using SSH. And it's really easy to actually set up with Putty. All we're going to do, you notice I spun open SSH. I'm going to click on tunnels here, and then we need to set up some information here. So source port, I'm going to set 3306. This is the default port that MySQL uses, okay? So what we're saying is we're going to map to 3306, and also similarly on our local host, we want 3306 as well, okay? So 3306 on the server side and 3306 on this side. Basically, that creates our tunnel. Go ahead and click Add. It looks like that. Then I'm going to come into here. Now we can set up the basic information for logging in. Okay, all of the Elastic images, the default user is named Ubuntu, Ubuntu, and you put an @ sign. Then what you need is the actual IP address. Now, to find out the IP address of your server is actually pretty easy. Once the server is actually running, we can go back over to our instance manager, and you see now it actually has finished. It says in fact says it's running. So if I click here, it mentions this, the public DNS. That is the IP address of your server. That's the address that you want to use. So I'm just going to select it with the mouse. I'm going to right-click and copy. Then I'm going to come over to here. I'm going to right-click and paste that in. And then I'm going to give this a name. So I'm going to call it EC2 and DB tunnel. Okay. So we're on EC2. We're using the database, and we have a tunnel set up. I'm going to go ahead and click Save so that I have that saved for later on if I want to be able to come in. I'm just going to go ahead and click Open. And if everything's set, I should see this little security alert. This is fine because the first time we connect to our server, we don't have its key, and so you just want to go ahead and click Yes. And then if everything is set up properly, you should see a link like this. All right. So just a couple of other things to do here. So the user data setup basically gave us did the install for SQLite and MySQL. However, one of the things that it did not do is to set a password for the main database user, and that's clearly a very big security hole. Something that definitely, if we have a server sitting out in the cloud, we want to fix. Plus, actually, the default install for MySQL does leave a few other things open as well that we'd also like to fix. So the easiest way of doing that is we run MySQL underscore, I'm going to type SEC. If I hit tab, that should do a command completion, and we should see that MySQL secure installation. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and click enter. It asks me for the current password for the root user. By default, the user data script did not create a password, so I can go ahead and click enter here. Then it asks me if I want to set a root password. You notice that the Y is capitalized. That means that yes, we actually want to do that. So I could just hit enter here, or I could type Y and hit enter. I'm just going to hit enter. I do want to set a root password, and now I'm going to set my root password. It will ask me to retype it to make sure that we're typing it correctly. And again, remember your root password. You can fix it, but it is painful to do, so best to make sure to remember it. All right, then it asks for these other things. For instance, do we want to get rid of the anonymous users? Yes, we do, so we're going to go ahead and click enter. Do we want to disallow root login remotely? Yes, we do. Again, click enter. Yes, we do. Click enter. Yes, we do. Click enter. All right, that should have secured our MySQL database. All right, so now we can actually check this out just to see if MySQL is working properly and that that we have the access, our root access set up accordingly. I'm going to type MySQL under -u and then root. So dash u means what user, and then -p tells it to ask me for the password. Okay, then I hit enter. And it's going to ask me for the root password. I'm going to type in my root password. I hit enter, and there we are. I'm actually logged into the server. I'm logged into to MySQL. All right, let me go ahead and click exit, and we're out of there. All right, so that verifies that our server, in fact, our MySQL install is in fact working. We could also try to run, for instance, SQLite on something like this, and again we see SQLite runs, so that's installed as well. All right, now let's connect to it using our good friend dbeaver. Okay, so you'll remember dbeaver from class. Notice I have not shut down my my Ubuntu window. All I did was minimize this. Very importantly, if I close this window, I'm going to close the SSH tunnel, and I'm not going to be able to use dbeaver to modify that. All right. So here I have dbeaver already installed. Again, if you're using this from, if you haven't seen this before, you can just Google dbeaver, real simple to install, download, etc. I'm going to fire up dbeaver. And here's all the options for connecting. I'm going to go to MySQL, and I'll select next. Okay. Now, the host this time is going to be localhost. Okay, localhost usually refers to in fact, always refers to the computer that you are currently logged into. That is my computer here. Now, you might think about that and say, well, wait a minute. I actually want to log into my computer on the cloud, so why don't I use that public DNS? Right? The reason is because we are tunneling from our local server to the other server using SSH. This was that whole thing that we set up in the SSH tunnel. So it says go to our machine on port 3306, which we know we've actually tunneled over. Database we're going to leave as blank. Username, we'll select the username, which is root, and password, you can enter in your password. All right, I'm going to go ahead and click test. And you'll notice it was, in fact, able to connect. That's good. Okay, let me go ahead and click next. I'll leave all of these options, click finish, and now I can spin this open just as we did before. The only difference is now all of the things that I do here are, in fact, actually making changes to the database that is in the cloud. Okay, so for instance, if I come over here and say that I want, if I come over here, say that I want a SQL editor, I can, for instance, say create database demo, control enter. There it ran. If I happen to come over to here, I'm going to hit up arrow to go back to my login there. Log in here. Show databases, there it is. The database, the demo database has been created. Okay, so we are in fact making our changes directly in the cloud. Once you're done with all of your changes, etc., you'll want to exit dbeaver. You'll then want to shut down your Putty link. Okay, you can either type exit at the prompt, or you can simply close the window. Now, here's some other tips about managing your servers and so forth. All right, so if I'm on my dashboard, my Amazon console, I want to go to instances. Okay. Now you see I actually have quite a few instances. They're all in this stopped state. Here's the instance that we just created. Okay, notice it's running. It's the only one that's running, so that's how I know. So here's basically how you're billed in Amazon. You're largely billed by the amount of compute time and accesses to your server. If your server isn't running, then you're largely not billed for that. So that means that if I'm not using the server, I can actually just shut it down and then come back to it later to make use of that. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do, I'm just going to click right here. I left clicked, and I'm going to give this a name, so I'll call this DB cloud, something like that, right? And then I can right-click here. Now, you'll notice under Actions, I have a few different options here. Terminate. If you are completely done with a server, if you never plan on using it again, this is also a good case of, if you screwed something up horribly, if you made a whole mess of your server, if you forgot your login passwords, you lost your key or something like that, you can click terminate, and that will delete the server altogether. It will actually shut it down and delete, so you won't be using any disk space, any of those things. Of course, any data that you have on there is then gone forever. On the other hand, most of the time what you're actually going to want to do is you're going to want to stop your server. So when you click stop, it'll say, yes, do you actually want to stop? And in fact, yes, we do. We'll go ahead and let it stop, okay? So it chugs along, and ultimately this will change from stopping to stopped. At that point, we don't have to worry about other people accessing it and paying for time that we're basically not using. So generally a good tip for saving, getting the max out of your Amazon credit, and the max out of your dollars. Now, the only thing that you have to be aware of is that once you have stopped your server, when you restart it, it will have a different DNS, a public DNS, a different IP address. So if I go here and I say start once again to start this server up, we'll actually see, it'll take a second or so, but we'll see once it does in fact get started that it will have a different IP address, okay? Now that's fine. All that means is when you go to log on to it with Putty, you're going to need to make sure to enter in the correct address. And I'll show you how to do that as this loads up. All right, so this is loading up. Sometimes Firefox actually is a little bit slower in updating that, so I'm just going to do a reload. Yeah, as we can see, it already is actually. So here I've clicked. There's the new address. Again, I'm going to select that and go to copy. So you see 134-88. All right, if I go back over to downloads and I run Putty, okay, I'm going to click on this and say load. Notice the IP address there is not the one that we just saw, right? 134-88. See, completely different. So all I'm going to do is just click right here before and select all of that to delete that out, and then I'm going to paste this in. So when I paste that in, I click open. Again, it'll give me the warning because since we've shut it down, when it's a different IP address, we have a different key. All right, so we do that, but you see we're back in and everything's good to go. Okay, so that's essentially what you need to do. As I said, I'll have another follow-up video that'll show you how to add your own personal IP address to the security group. So you're going to want to check that out from home to make sure that you do that. And as I said, basically, just when you're done with your servers or you're not using it, go ahead and click stop. It's a really good way to save your money, etc. The other thing I'll mention, there is also an app, an AWS app, console app for your smartphones. So you can install it on your smartphone. So that way, if you're worried or you weren't sure if you actually shut down your server, you can just pull that up on your smartphone, log in, and actually check your instance and stop it as well. All right, good luck. If you've got any questions, send me an email.